Fellas, there are some huge fights to be made right now in the UFC. Fights that are going to sell so much pay-per-views. Fights that are going to get so much attention. And there's so much in every weight class. But today we're going to be talking about the single biggest super fight that you can make in every UFC weight class. These don't necessarily have to make sense, so I'm not saying that they all deserve to fight each other, but I'm saying I think these are the biggest super fights you can make pay-per-view wise and attention wise. And yeah, this isn't like I said. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be the funnest fight in terms of stylistically the funnest, but purely what would probably get the most pay-per-views in this division. And we're going to go straight in there with heavyweight. I think the biggest super fight at heavyweight is Jon Jones versus Sergey Pavlovich, and I think we can all agree. Jones is right now the cash cow at heavyweight. He is the biggest star at heavyweight, one of the biggest stars in the sport. So no matter who he fights, he's going to get pay-per-views. But I think out of everyone, most people want to see him against Sergey Pavlovich. That's the fight most of us want. The Stipe fight, Stipe is probably bigger in name value than Sergey Pavlovich, but I think a lot of people know what's going to happen in that fight. They know that Jones is going to win, whereas there's an actual danger factor for Jones when he fights Sergey Pavlovich. So I think that's the biggest fight that you could make. I think this would sell the most pay-per-views at heavyweight. Maybe Pavlovich would have trouble selling the fight because, he's not the type of guy to trash talk it, but his fighting style and his highlights would sell the fight for themselves. 6 first-round knockouts in a row would sell itself, and he's the biggest threat, in my opinion, for Jon Jones at heavyweight, or he's at least one of them. Everyone wants this fight. Everyone in the MMA community wants this fight. I don't know anyone that doesn't want this fight, and it is the toughest fight for Jon Jones right now. There's some pretty tough fights for Jones, Tom Aspinall, maybe even Jailton Almeida, but I think Sergey Pavlovich right now is the toughest fight for Jones, or at least one of them, and he's an extremely risky fight for Jones, because Jones versus Stipe, we've got the greatest of all time versus the greatest heavyweight, but I don't think Stipe has that danger factor that Sergey Pavlovich has. He's not like Sergey Pavlovich is this up-and-coming prospect who's on an absolute, he's on a streak right now, knocking everyone out, and it would be a huge threat to Jones. And it's actually hard to pick who would win this fight. I think I'd probably edge it towards Jones because obviously it's Jon Jones. I don't really want to bet against him, but this would be a hard pick. This would be a hard pick, man. This would be a hard pick. Pavlovich deserves a title fight, but we're most likely going to see Jones retire after the Stipe fight. But if Jones did decide to fight Pavlovich, I think this would sell so much pay-per-views. Everyone wants to see this fight. He's one of the biggest fights right now. And before everyone says, what about Francis Ngannou? I'm not going to include him because he's not in the UFC anymore. But if Ngannou was in the UFC, I'd include him. But the next best... can't speak. The next best thing we've got is Sergey Pavlovich. So I'm going to say Jones versus Pavlovich is the biggest fight we can make right now at heavyweight. I think it would sell so much pay-per-views. And at light heavyweight, this fight is actually close to being made. I think it's going to be announced soon. It's probably going to be made for UFC 296. If you watched my card builder, I said this should be the main event for UFC 296. It is a huge fight. And the good thing about this matchup is that it's most likely going to happen. Yuri Prohaska versus Alex Pereira. This would be such a fun matchup, man. Yuri Prohaska's a great fighter. 3 fights in the UFC, I believe, and he's finished all of them. Alex Pereira, do I even need to say it? First guy to finish Adesanya in the UFC, in the UFC, in MMA, first guy to finish Adesanya. Always in a fun fight is Pereira. He's mostly always in a fun fight. Even that Jan Blachowicz fight, that second round and third round when he was rocking him, the Adesanya fights, the Strickland knockout, even the decision he got over against Bruno Silva, these fights, Alex Pereira is a fun guy, and this would be such a good striking matchup. Stylistically, they go well together. Yuri Prohaska, one of the most crafty strikers in the UFC. Alex Pereira, one of the most technical fighters in the UFC. I'd love to see them fight, man. I'd love to see them fight, and I can't wait if they do fight. Both fan favourites as well. They've both got so many fans. Both got huge fan bases that would help push this fight. So stylistically, it's really interesting, and I think this would sell so much pay-per-views. This is the best fight you can make, and the biggest pay-per-view fight you can make at light heavyweight right now. The 2 biggest stars in the division. I think this is the biggest fight, and it's not really close. 100%. I can't wait to see him against each other. Like, even when Alex Pereira was at middleweight, I was so, even before this fight was even inevitable, I was just talking to myself, like, oh, this fight would be great. If we saw Yuri Prohaska and Pereira, that would be great. And now it's pretty much inevitable. They're going to fight eventually, so I can't wait for them to fight. But yeah, this would be the biggest fight, a super fight at light heavyweight right now for the light heavyweight belt, the vacant light heavyweight belt, and I can't wait to see it. Middleweight, it's got to be Adesanya versus Hamzat Chimaev. Adesanya versus Duplessis is a fairly big fight. Adesanya versus Strickland, not really. Adesanya versus Hamzat would be huge. Hamzat's a big name in the MMA world. Like, casual fans should know Hamzat Chimaev. Like, even if you don't really watch UFC, I'm sure a lot of these casual fans know Hamzat Chimaev, and obviously they'll know Israel Adesanya. So this would sell pay-per-views, man. Right now, in my opinion, it's Izzy's hardest current fight at 185, and people are going to tune in because they want to see how Izzy's going to handle the adversity of Hamzat Chimaev, because it is his hardest fight. He's harder than Duplessis. It's harder to beat than Strickland. 100% Izzy's hardest fight at 185 at middleweight right now, and it's the first real grappling threat that Adesanya has faced, which is going to be interesting because what other grappling threat has he really faced? Like Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker, Derek Brunson, like 7 years ago. Like, this Hamzat Chimaev is the best grappler in the middleweight division right now, in my opinion, or at least excluding maybe Bo Nickel. Even then, is competitive. But right now, at 185, Hamzat Chimaev versus Adesanya sells the most. Both huge names, stylistically interesting. Hamzat's undefeated, so that helps. So, yeah, I'm going to say that this is the biggest fight at 185 right now. This would sell so much pay-per-views. You don't even need like a big co-main event. Like, you don't even need a stacked card for this. This would sell itself. Huge fight, and I think this could happen if Hamzat Chimaev beats Costa and Adesanya goes through. Now the thing is with Adesanya, he's got a lot of people to fight. He's got to fight Strickland, then he's got to fight Dricus Duplessis. But if he beats both those people, I really want to see this fight. I think a lot of us want to see this fight. This would be huge. The build-up would be insane. The trash talk. Probably wouldn't be as good as Adesanya versus Strickland in terms of press conferences, but the fight itself would be huge at middleweight, and it would be the biggest super fight. Welterweight, I'm going with Leon Edwards versus Covington. Another matchup that is nearly confirmed for UFC 295. Yeah, it's looking like Leon Edwards' first defense is going to be. I can't speak. It's going to be against Covington. And I think it's a huge fight. I mean, any fight with Covington in is going to sell. Because Covington can sell fights. You know, he's great on the mic. He knows how to hype up a fight. Even the Masvidal fight. That Masvidal card, what was it? UFC 272? It weren't even that huge of a card. But it got pay-per-views just because Covington was on it and there was so much beef. So if Colby Covington's on the card, it's going to sell. And on top of that, it's kind of what the whole UK versus USA narrative. The UK behind Leon Edwards. The USA behind Colby. So there's that whole narrative going on, and it's a tough fight for Leon. Like, this isn't just an easy fight for Leon. This is a really tough fight for Leon. Like, he's just come off 2 tough fights with Kamaru Usman, and it's stylistically, Colby's hard as well. It's a tough fight for Leon. You know, Colby's tough as well. Like, this isn't no like Leon Edwards versus Masvidal, where we all know that Leon Edwards is going to smoke him. This is Colby Covington. He could pull out a win here. I don't think he would, but he could pull out a win. So it's a tough fight for Leon. They both have so much fans as well. I think everyone's, and it's kind of hard to not be a Leon Edwards fan. There's nothing you can really hate him for. Colby Covington's kind of hit or miss. You either love him or you hate him, but there are a lot of people that like him. That doesn't make sense. There are a lot of people that love him, I mean. And it's another chance for Colby to become champ as well. People are going to tune in, because if Covington becomes champ, that'll be huge. Like, O'Malley became champ last night, and there was so much pop over that. So if Colby Covington somehow managed to become welterweight champ, that will get so much attention. So this fight for me is the biggest fight you can make at welterweight and at lightweight. Now, this has to be huge because the lightweight division is the most popular division in the UFC, so they're going to have to stack this fight. Conor McGregor versus Charles Oliveira. Well, if there's going to be a super fight, it has to have Charles Oliveira in. That's rule, not Charles Oliveira. It has to have Conor McGregor in. You can't have a super fight without Conor McGregor. He would sell the fight. He doesn't even have to do anything. You put McGregor's name on it, instant 500k pay-per-view buys. But yeah, Conor McGregor's Conor McGregor. He's going to sell pay-per-views. Doesn't matter who it could be Conor McGregor versus CM Punk. It could be Conor McGregor versus a cameraman. It could be Conor McGregor versus Pat Barry. It doesn't matter who he's fighting. If Conor McGregor's fighting, he's going to sell. But the thing I'd say about Charles Oliveira is that they're both really exciting. This will be so exciting because they're both the most exciting in the division. Conor McGregor's McGregor and Charles Oliveira. I mean, look at his recent fights. Beneil Dariush finished him in 1 round. Then we've got the Islam fight, lost in a round, but 2 rounds, but who cares? Then he finishes Chandler, finishes Gaethje, finishes Poirier. I'm not saying it in order, but, had a tough fight with Ferguson as well. Charles Oliveira is on a finishing streak. He's got a lot of danger around him. They're both dangerous. Both have huge fan bases as well. You know, Conor McGregor's got the whole casual fan base. Charles Oliveira, again, I think everyone's an Oliveira fan. I don't think it's possible to not be an Oliveira fan unless you're like an Islam diehard fan. And it'll be such a fun matchup, man. Stylistically, and the build up to it would be fun. This would be huge in the lightweight division. This would be huge. Like, Islam versus Oliveira too, that's going to be a big fight. But if you think Islam's selling more than McGregor, you're crazy. McGregor versus, I mean, part of me wants to say McGregor versus Islam because it's kind of McGregor versus Habib 2-esque, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of got the same vibes as McGregor versus Habib, but I think Oliveira would sell. I think Oliveira would sell a lot of money, a lot of pay-per-views, because he's just exciting. Like, you look at Islam's fights, I don't think he's got the same excitement as Oliveira, so I'm going to say that in the lightweight division, McGregor versus Oliveira is the biggest fight you can make right now, pay-per-view wise. Featherweight. Now, originally, I was going to go with, well, I'll say who it is, Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. Originally, I was going to say that it's going to be Volkanovski versus Sterling, but Sterling got knocked out last night and he's no longer champ, so I don't think that fight would be as big now, so Volkanovski versus Topuria. Again, one of those matchups that is nearly inevitable, probably going to happen very soon. And it's a huge fight in the featherweight division. Volkanovski's cleared everyone out. He's beaten Holloway 3 times, beaten Ortega, Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, Jose Aldo. He's cleared out the division. There's no one else left for Volkanovski to fight. I mean, who else hasn't he fought in the top 5? Arnold Allen. I don't think Arnold Allen's that good at selling pay-per-views, so it's got to be Topuria. In my opinion, he's Volkanovski's biggest threat at 145. I say this all the time, but I feel like it's a dark horse, it's Ilia Topuria. I feel like he's going to come out there, knock out Volkanovski and walk off and shock the world. I've got a really bad feeling that that's going to happen, because if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Topuria. The thing is, they'd sell the fight on the press conference as well, because they'd trash talk, you know, Ilia Topuria be speaking Spanish, Volkanovski be like, yeah, you're done. That's it, you're done. But this would sell, man. This would sell so much pay-per-views. Like, the trash talk's already happened. You saw the face-off after UFC 290 where they trash talked. It did sell on the press conference. The fighting style would sell for itself. Ilia Topuria is undefeated, never lost a fight. Volkanovski pound for pound best. The fight sells itself, and it's quite a scary matchup for Volk. Like I said, this isn't just no Korean Zombie. This isn't no Yair Rodriguez who, he's a scary kicker and he's got BJJ. I think stylistically, Ilia Topuria is a very tough fight for Volk. So I think this would sell. And Volk's a big star now. Like, let's not act like Volk isn't a huge star right now. You know, he's got the whole thing going on with Prime and Adesanya. Volkanovski's a big household name, and he's a huge star in the UFC right now, and rightfully so. So I'm going to say this is the biggest fight at featherweight we can make right now. Bantamweight. It's got to be the Sugar Shaw and Marlon Vera. I mean, after UFC 292 kind of just sold itself, really. This is the biggest fight you can make at bantamweight. If there's going to be anyone in the biggest fight, it's got to have O'Malley. He's a huge star. Everyone knows him. You know, he's hanging around with the Nelk boys. Everyone knows who Sean O'Malley is. It's got to include him. It's definitely not him versus Marab or him versus Sandhagen. It's got to be him versus Vera. I mean, those two, first of all, they have beef. They've had beef for a long time. They don't like each other. Look at the media days. Look at the post-fight interviews of UFC 292. They were talking trash about each other. They don't like each other. And the thing that makes this interesting is O'Malley's only ever loss is to Marlon Vera, which is interesting. Like O'Malley would be undefeated if it wasn't for Marlon Vera. I know that was quite a controversial ending to the fight, but it'll be a great way to build the fight. The build-up would be insane, and it's such an exciting striking matchup as well. It's not like stylistically boring. It'd be fun to watch on the feet. I think they'd have a face-off. If you look at UFC 292, when you look at Sean O'Malley versus Sterling, how they faced off before the fight with Bruce Buffer in the middle, I think these two would do the same. They don't like each other. Both big names in the bantamweight division, and they would sell. So I'm going to say Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera is the biggest super fight we can make at bantamweight. And finally for flyweight, this might be a bit odd, but I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno versus Mohamed Makayev. Mohamed Makayev is probably the biggest prospect right now at flyweight, and if he puts together a couple wins, I think he's going to be fighting Tim Elliott, and if he puts together a couple wins, like I think he's one of the youngest fighters in the UFC roster as well, besides like Raul Rosas Jr. I think he's only like 21, 22, so he's a huge prospect. Yeah, I think this would be a huge fight in the bantamweight division. I mean, flyweight division. I mean, Brandon Moreno, in my opinion, is the biggest star at flyweight. I think he's a fan favourite. I think if you talk to most fans, I think a lot of them will like Brandon Moreno the most. Or yeah, I think he's the biggest name at flyweight, and I think the best to sell the fight would be Makayev. Makayev's a little trash talker, undefeated as well as Makayev. He's never lost a fight in his life, in his amateur career and his professional career. He's never lost a fight. It's a classic grappler versus striker. But the thing is with Makayev, I wouldn't call him a boring grappler. I mean, he had one boring fight in the UFC in his second fight, but apart from that, you look at his UFC highlights, he's got heart. He's not a boring fighter. He's got heart. He's a huge prospect here in the UK. So I think this would be the biggest fight that you can make at flyweight. Maybe for the belt, but even without the belt, I think it sells. But I'm going to say this is the biggest flyweight matchup. And yeah, please let me know if you agree with these are the biggest super fights. Tell me if I missed anyone out. And yeah, thank you for watching.